really, we are our oldest friends. We've known each other since the age of 11.
Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel were once the epitome of harmony, not just in their music, but in their lifelong friendship. However, behind the flawless vocals and poetic lyrics, a tension brewed for decades, one that ultimately shattered their partnership. For years, fans speculated about the true reasons behind their split, but Simon never spoke in depth about the real source of their division. That silence has now been broken, and the truth is more shocking than anyone expected. The duo's relationship wasn't just another typical band fallout. It was a deeply personal rift between two men who had known each other since childhood. From their humble beginnings as two boys from Queens, New York, to becoming one of the best-selling music duos in history, their journey was filled with highs and lows. While Simon was the mastermind behind the songwriting, Garfunkel's hauntingly angelic voice was what made their music iconic. But the imbalance in creative control would eventually turn admiration into resentment. For years, the question lingered: why did Simon and Garfunkel never fully reconcile? Was it jealousy, creative differences, or something far more personal? Some believed their breakup was inevitable, while others hoped they would mend fences. And now, decades later, Paul Simon has revealed what truly happened and why their relationship was doomed long before their final split. In the world of music, duos often struggle with power dynamics. While both artists contribute to their success, there's always the looming question: who is the real star? For Simon and Garfunkel, this issue was never explicitly discussed, but it was always present. And when Simon recently opened up about their fractured friendship, he confirmed that the divide wasn't just about music. It was about identity, control, and years of unspoken frustration. Now, as Paul Simon finally lays out the truth about his partnership with Garfunkel, the revelations are sending shockwaves through the music world. What led to the breaking point? Why did their relationship become irreparable? And most importantly, could they have ever found their way back to each other? The answers to these questions are far more complicated than anyone ever imagined. Long before they were Simon and Garfunkel, they were simply Paul and Art, two kids from Queens who bonded over music. They met in elementary school and quickly formed a connection, sneaking out of class to harmonize in hallways inspired by their idols, the Everly Brothers. Their first moment of rebellion? Sharing a cigarette behind their school. A small act that would unknowingly mark the beginning of a lifelong journey together. At just 11 years old, they discovered their shared love for singing, and by the time they were teenagers, had formed their first musical duo, Tom and Jerry. The name wasn't as memorable as Simon and Garfunkel, but it was enough to get them their first hit, Hey Schoolgirl, which landed on the Billboard charts. This early success could have solidified their bond, but instead, it planted the first seeds of resentment. Simon was the one crafting the songs, pouring his soul into lyrics, while Garfunkel was simply lending his voice. But in the public eye, the dynamic seemed reversed. People assumed Garfunkel was the leader, the frontman, the voice of the duo, while Simon, the actual songwriter, often faded into the background. This misunderstanding gnawed at Simon, even in those early years. He knew he was the brains behind the operation, but the world didn't see it that way. Then came the betrayal that would never fully heal. A record executive approached Simon with an offer for a solo project, and without telling Garfunkel, he accepted. When Garfunkel found out, he was devastated. He felt abandoned, used, and most of all, like he had been left behind. This was their first major fight, and while they would eventually move past it, the wound never truly closed. It was a pattern that would repeat itself throughout their career. Moments of harmony, followed by moments of betrayal. And as the years went on, that initial crack in their friendship widened into an unbridgeable chasm. By the early 1960s, both Simon and Garfunkel had moved on from their teenage duo and were pursuing their own interests. Garfunkel was studying architecture at Columbia University, while Simon was still determined to make it in the music industry. Then, fate intervened. Simon had written a song, a haunting, poetic piece called The Sound of Silence. It was unlike anything they had done before, and when they reunited to record it, neither of them realized it would change their lives forever. Initially, the song flopped. Their debut album, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., barely made a dent in the charts, and the duo quietly went their separate ways again. But then, something miraculous happened. Without their knowledge, producer Tom Wilson took The Sound of Silence, added electric instruments, and released it as a single. Almost overnight, it became a massive hit. The duo was suddenly famous, but there was a problem. Simon hadn't been consulted about the changes to his song, and while the world was celebrating, he was fuming. For Garfunkel, success was all that mattered. He was ready to embrace the limelight and enjoy the ride. But for Simon, it was another moment where he felt like he had lost control of his own music. He was grateful for the success, but deep down, he resented how it had happened. He had poured his soul into that song, only to have someone else reshape it without his approval. And yet, he had no choice but to ride the wave of their sudden stardom. The fallout from the Sound of Silence was subtle, but it was the beginning of an internal war between the two. Garfunkel was happy to go along with the industry's demands, while Simon was growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of creative control. And as their fame skyrocketed, so did the tension. If The Sound of Silence was the song that made them famous, then Bridge Over Troubled Water was the song that broke them. Written by Simon, the song was meant to be a showcase of their friendship, a final, grand declaration of their bond. But instead, it became a symbol of their impending breakup. Simon had envisioned the song as a simple duet, but Garfunkel insisted that he sing it alone. At first, Simon agreed, thinking it would be best for the song. But as the track gained momentum and became one of the biggest hits of their career, Simon began to regret his decision. He had written the song, poured his heart into it, and yet, once again, Garfunkel was the one getting all the credit. Things only got worse when Garfunkel took on an acting role in Catch-22, leaving Simon to finish their final album alone. It was the ultimate betrayal. Simon felt abandoned, just as he had been years before when Garfunkel had left him for college. He was left to carry the weight of their success on his shoulders, and the resentment became too much to bear. By the time Bridge Over Troubled Water was released, their relationship was already beyond repair. They were barely speaking, and their final performance together was nothing more than a formality. In the parking lot after the show, they shook hands and went their separate ways. No goodbyes, no final words, just silence. Despite their onstage chemistry, there was an undercurrent of jealousy that neither Simon nor Garfunkel could ignore. Garfunkel's soaring vocals gave him a level of celebrity status that Simon resented, even though Simon was the one writing the songs that propelled them to stardom. It was an imbalance that would eat away at their friendship for years. Paul Simon never explicitly voiced his jealousy during their peak, but behind closed doors, it was an unspoken war. When fans screamed Art Garfunkel's name at concerts, Simon couldn't help but feel overlooked. He was the mastermind, the one who meticulously crafted the lyrics and melodies, but to the audience, Garfunkel was the angelic voice that brought those songs to life. That stark contrast left a bitter taste in Simon's mouth, even as they sold out arenas worldwide. Even their own manager, Mort Lewis, noticed the strain. He once observed that both men secretly envied what the other had. Simon wished he had Garfunkel's effortless stage presence, while Garfunkel knew deep down that without Simon's songwriting, he wouldn't have a career. Instead of acknowledging their differences, they let it fester, and every small disagreement became another battle in their silent war. The final straw came when Bridge Over Troubled Water, Simon's greatest songwriting achievement, was hailed as Garfunkel's defining moment. While Simon had envisioned the song as a soft duet-style ballad, Garfunkel took full control, belting the track with operatic grandeur. Fans were mesmerized. Critics praised Garfunkel's vocal delivery, and Simon felt like he had just handed his masterpiece away. Garfunkel, on the other hand, had his own frustrations. He never quite understood why Simon felt slighted. In his mind, he was just doing his job, singing the way he always had. The miscommunication between them was staggering, and by the time they realized they were standing on opposite sides of a war, it was already too late. Their breakup in 1970 was a quiet, understated end to a legendary partnership. Unlike bands that imploded in a dramatic fashion, Simon and Garfunkel simply stopped speaking. There was no farewell tour, no emotional final show, just a simple handshake in the parking lot, as if they both knew their time was up. The music industry was stunned. How could two men who had just released one of the greatest albums of all time, Bridge Over Troubled Water, suddenly call it quits? Fans desperately searched for answers, but neither Simon or Garfunkel gave any. The truth was, they were both tired of competing, tired of feeling like they owed something to each other, and most of all, tired of pretending everything was fine. Garfunkel was convinced they would reunite eventually. He never saw the split as permanent, and assumed they would pick up where they left off when the time was right. But Simon had a different plan. He didn't just want a break, he wanted out for good. The thought of returning to the partnership made him feel trapped, and for the first time in years, he was free to make music exactly the way he wanted. In the years that followed, their paths couldn't have been more different. Garfunkel dabbled in acting, starring in Catch-22 and Carnal Knowledge, while Simon poured himself into his solo career. He was determined to prove he didn't need Garfunkel, and with hits like 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and Still Crazy After All These Years, he did just that. Garfunkel, however, struggled. His solo albums never reached the heights of Simon's, and he began to resent the way history was being written. While Simon was praised as a musical genius, Garfunkel was slowly being reduced to just the guy who sang the songs. That realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Despite their icy separation, fate brought them back together several times over the years, and each time, it ended in disaster. Their 1981 concert in Central Park was their most successful reunion. Over 500,000 fans gathered to witness the legendary duo perform together again. But behind the scenes, it was anything but a happy reunion. During rehearsals, old wounds reopened. Garfunkel still believed they could revive their partnership, but Simon wasn't having it. He had spent a decade proving he could survive without Garfunkel, and the last thing he wanted was to be tethered to him again. To Simon, the reunion was just that, a one-time event, not a fresh start. Fans had no idea how tense things had become. On stage, they looked like old friends, effortlessly harmonizing as if no time had passed. But the moment they walked off stage, they barely spoke. The reunion was strictly business for Simon. Nothing more. Nothing less. The final nail in the coffin came when they attempted to record a new album together. Simon, ever the perfectionist, had an exact vision for how it should sound, but Garfunkel refused to be treated like a backup singer. The arguments escalated until Simon did the unthinkable. He erased Garfunkel's vocals entirely and released the songs as a solo project. Garfunkel was blindsided. He had believed, even after everything, that their friendship could be salvaged. But Simon's actions made it painfully clear. There was no future for Simon and Garfunkel. The dream was over. For decades, the bitterness between them remained unspoken. While fans speculated, neither Simon or Garfunkel gave a definitive answer about what truly happened between them, until now. When Simon recently opened up about their fractured relationship, he didn't hold back. He spoke about the betrayals, the jealousy, and the deep-seated resentment that never faded. But his most shocking revelation? He never wanted to see Garfunkel again. Hearing those words felt like a punch to the gut for longtime fans. The idea that two men who had once been inseparable could now barely stand the thought of each other was heartbreaking. Simon and Garfunkel may never reunite, but their music will live on forever. Their songs captured the essence of an era, and their voices, despite the bitterness between them, created something timeless. But the reality of their story serves as a reminder that even the strongest friendships can fall apart under the weight of success. They started as two kids who simply loved to sing, but fame changed them. Their partnership was built on music, but destroyed by ego. Don't forget to leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into music's biggest secrets.